Draw that awareness to your breath. Don't try to change the breath, but just allow the awareness to merge into it fully. Oxygen, as you bring in sacred prana, sacred life force, and as you bring in the sacred rushing into and through you. Unclogging all of the ways that you're stuck inside, all of the blockages, all of the places of constriction and contraction, all of that you're holding on to. Just feel the flow of the waters of Mother Ganga flowing in, loosening and freeing it. Feel those divine waters of the Mother Goddess. The waters of liberation and freedom. Feel them flowing into every corner of your being, every cell. And as you exhale, allow yourself to let go and feel yourself consciously, deliberately, intentionally giving into the waters of Mother Ganga, surrendering into her waters all of that is keeping you stuck and holding you back. Just let it go into her waters. All of the roles that we play, all of the masks, all of the attachments and expectations, all of the false identification, the story that you tell yourself about yourself. Just let it go. Just give it into the waters of the Mother Goddess. and let her carry it away and make you free. All of the drama, all of the grudges, the anger. Just let it go into her waters. As you exhale, slowly and gently bring the palms of your hands together at chest level in Namaste. And just gently rub the palms of your hands against each other. Press the palms of your hands into your closed eyes. Slowly lower the hands and open your eyes. Welcome to Satsang. So beautiful to be with you all this evening, and especially on this sacred full moon night. We'll begin, as we always do, with one of the questions that comes in advance from our online internet audience from all over the world. And then we'll open it up to any questions that any of you have. What is God? This was asked by one of our family members with a name, not a name, but what do you call it? What do you call that? Thank you. A handle on Instagram called Inventive Thinking. So, what is God? About 3 nights ago, those of you who are here may remember, I had a very, very little girl about this big sitting right here next to me with her question of, how do I know God exists? How do we believe in God? And it's really the same answer. What I had said to her was that when we see a painting, even if it doesn't have a signature of the painter, we know obviously there was a painter because we have a painting. If you've got a beautifully cooked meal, even if the cook themselves didn't bring it out to you and say, hey, I'm the one who cooked all that, you know that someone cooked it because you've got a beautifully cooked meal. And when we look around ourselves and we look at flowers blossoming and trees giving fruit and sunrises and sunsets and all of that which we see, it's very clear that this has been created. And if it's been created, then by definition there is a creator. Like if you have a painting, you have a painter. If you have a meal, you have a cook. You have a sculpture, so you have a sculptor. In the same way, we have a creation. Therefore, we have a creator. And so when you ask what is God, there's different ways we can think about it. And the reason is that the word God in English is one word, whereas in Sanskrit, for example, we have, I'm just going to say God only knows. We have God only knows so many different words for God that are not just different synonyms for the same divine reality, but that are actually different aspects. So for example, we speak about Brahman, meaning the eternal supreme reality, meaning that which pervades everything. If you study Vedanta, especially Advaita Vedanta, it's rooted in the principle that there is nothing but God. Everything else is an illusion. The concept of Maya arises from this belief that all that is real and true is God. Everything else is an illusion. So that's one way of speaking about God, is this supreme reality, infinite reality, nameless, formless. Of course, can take an infinite number of forms because is infinite. But that there is nothing but God. Everything is just an illusion of form. A way of thinking about that is an ocean with waves. If you imagined that we had only one infinite ocean rather than, 7 different oceans. One ocean, no land, nothing breaking up the ocean, just an infinite ocean. Well, in that ocean you have waves that arise. When we say illusion, we don't mean optical illusion, but an illusion meaning even when a wave arises, the highest truth of that wave, even as a wave, its highest truth is ocean. If you look at a drop or a spoonful of wave under a microscope, it's ocean. No scientist looks at it and says, oh yeah, this is a wave. It's ocean. So on that level of God is, what is God? Well, the answer to that would be, what isn't God? There is nothing that isn't God. Everything is God. But then we also think of God as the creator. In the Hindu tradition, that is Brahma, the creator, as distinguished from Vishnu, the sustainer, Shiva, the energy of disillusion. People say destruction, but destruction has all of this negative component attached to it, and it isn't negative. It's disillusion so that the cycle can continue. So that's another aspect of God. God is the creator. God is the sustainer. God is the dissolver. When you say it in English, though, if this were in Hindi or Sanskrit, and you had a question that said, who or what is Brahma, or who or what is Vishnu, or who or what is Shiva, or who or what is Brahman, you would know exactly what they meant. Like, which aspect of the divine are you being asked about? But in English, when we just say God, could be any of those aspects. So, on the deepest and highest level, there is nothing but God. But then we have all of the energies of the divine. There's energies of creation, energies of sustenance, energies of dissolution. Which of course again means God is everything. That which creates, that which is created. Because of course, as it said so beautifully, we are not created just by the Creator, but of the Creator. And so what is God? God is us. God is everything. And it's such an extraordinary way to move through the world with this idea that everything is God. Whether you think of God as just the supreme reality, or even if you just think of God as the creator, well, still everything is God. Everything's been created. Which means, of course, that everything is sacred. Whether you think of it as sacred because it in and of itself is the divine, or whether you think of it as sacred because it's been created by the divine. Either way, it's sacred, which invites us to move through our life with an energy of sacredness. That whomever we meet, whatever we see, whatever we walk upon is sacred. The ground is sacred. The path is sacred. Those along the path with us are sacred. We, walking the path, are sacred. So it's a very beautiful truth and a very beautiful way of moving through the world. Beautiful. Well, thank you to Inventive Thinking for a beautiful place to start tonight. Other questions? Any question that anyone has? Yeah, just come up to either of the microphones.
Sadhviji, so fasting, as we know, is the latest dieting fad, right? So there's intermittent fasting, there's alternate day fasting, and then there's water fasting. So some think these extreme forms of fasting are dangerous, but there are others that swear by the benefits. So I'm just curious as to what's your take on that?
Great. Well, one of the things that I love about the science of Ayurveda is that there's really almost no black or whites, because it all depends on who is the body that we are talking about. What's the body's nature? What's the body's specific elements? What time of year is it? Where do they live? So for example, you could take something that is considered nectar. Well, it may be nectar for certain people, not nectar for other people. Might be nectar in certain seasons, not nectar at all in other seasons. Could be nectar in some way, not in other ways. You take something like honey, for example. Nectar if it's raw, poison if it's cooked. You take something like ghee. Wonderful for certain body types, not so wonderful for others. Wonderful certain times of year. Got to lighten up on it a little bit other times of year. So similarly with fasting, anything that you take that's working with the physical body and health, it's going to depend upon your body type. It's going to depend upon times of year. It's going to depend upon where you live. we do know that fasting is really good for you. In general, really good for you. Traditionally in India, you'll see almost all traditional Indians, people who have been really raised in very traditional ways of Ayurvedic living. Almost all of them will fast 1 day a week. Now people, it's very interesting the way that the sages did it. They've tied in all of these really good health benefits into something that's religious. So for example, we should take care of the planet. So what have they taught us? To pray to the flowers, to the trees before you pluck anything. They've given us mantras and prayers for the flowers, for the trees, for the earth, for the air, for the elements, to remind us, hey, it's sacred. In our worship ceremonies, we offer water, offer flowers of the earth. We offer air. Why? To remind us, hey, better be clean. Nobody's going to offer, polluted water in their prayer ceremony. Nobody's going to offer a flower that's been stepped on into the dirt. Meaning, soil must be clean. Water must be clean. Air must be clean. You're not going to wave the fumes from an exhaust fan over your puja. In the same way, they've given us all of the different days of the week, each day having the name of a different divine aspect. And so, for example, people who worship Lord Shiva would fast on Mondays. People who worship Hanumanji would fast on Tuesdays. People who worship the Guru would fast on Thursdays. And so rather than it being given as a health benefit, fast once a week, it's told, oh, if you want to make Shiva happy, if you worship Shiva, his day is Monday, you should observe fast on that day. So we know fasting is really good for you. Now, as a quick aside, because we're in India and surrounded with a lot of people from India, it's important to mention that fasting is not about all of the corners we can cut and all of the gimmicks we can do to still call it a fast. I remember when I first came to India, I had been here, a few weeks, few months, and I was sitting in the dining room eating, and I had my thali with, just the very basic mung dal that they make, and some very basic vegetable, I don't remember what it was, and a dry chapati. And the guy sitting next to me had a thali packed high, full of pakoras and puris and some potato vegetable that literally looked like an oil tanker had crashed in it. The whole top level was all just oil. And he looks at my plate and he looks at me and he says, "You're not fasting?" And I thought I couldn't possibly have actually heard what he just said. And so I didn't respond, and he said it again. He said, "You're not fasting?" And I was stunned, as you can imagine, because the implication was that he was fasting and I wasn't fasting, and therefore I was committing some sort of major sin. And I said, "No." And he's like, "Oh, you must fast today. It's Ekadashi. It's very important to fast today." And I said nothing because I couldn't possibly think of anything that was polite to say. But later, I went and asked, and I was like, "This guy, he said this, but the puris and the pakoras and the, vegetables with all the oil." And they said, "Yeah, because the rule is that you're not supposed to have any grains on that day. And so, or any of the normal salt, so you can use a different type of salt, and you can use things that are not theoretically grain." So they've got all of these things that are theoretically fruit, because they come from different aspects of trees, rather than growing in the ground like wheat does or that rice does. And they make things like pizza dough out of it and dough for pakoras out of it. And so people today all over India observe fasting by essentially stuffing themselves full of all kinds of rich, fried, junky food that just happen to be made from things that when you look at their genus and species, taxonomically, you could say, well, yeah, I guess it's not a grain, it's theoretically a fruit. But it's really not a fast. The Sanskrit word for fast, there's two different words that are used. One is upvas, which literally means sitting near to. And it means sitting near to God. Like my day of fasting is to be near God. Anybody who's ever tried to meditate on a full stomach knows it's a lot easier to do it on an empty or very light stomach. And so the day that you are sitting near to God is a day in which you are supposed to be very light. It's why traditionally they say fruits, not meaning something pulled from a tree and ground up and deep fried into a pizza dough, but actually like an apple. That actually is a fruit that comes from a tree. So upvas means sitting near to, and it's not at all about what you're eating or not eating, but about staying light so that you are connected and anchored and grounded with God. The other word that's used is vrat, which has much more to do with a commitment, a vow, than again anything dietary or physical. So people sometimes will say, today is my upvas. Sometimes they'll say, today is my vrat. The words are essentially synonymous to mean a fast. But if you look at what they really mean, you'll realize that neither of them has anything to do with actually what I'm eating. The point of it is I forsake food or certain foods in order to stay light, in order to stay healthy, in order to stay awake and fresh when I'm meditating and sitting near God. And in order to remind myself, because there's another reason for it, our fasting is a very powerful spiritual practice. Because food is not bad, food is good. We will go back to eating, obviously. But most of us live like we are slaves to impulses in the body. And so whether it's emotional impulses or physical impulses, I had to yell at them. They said something and I was insulted. Like, what did you want me to do? I had to be obnoxious back. Or, well, they hit me, so of course I had to hit them back. As though somehow we're just stimulus response machines. Something happens, we have a signal in our body or in our brain, and so we act. Or people will say things like, oh my God, yeah, I was just so overcome with passion, I had to, have sex with that person even though they're somebody else's wife or husband, or, I'm married to somebody else, or whatever it may be. But we blame the impulses of our body and of our mind as though we were slaves to them, with the sort of, well, what did you want me to do? Like, I had the impulse, of course I had to, do it. And what fasting reminds us is, because when you fast, your stomach grumbles. 100 times during the day you reach out thinking you're going to eat something, and then you have to remember, oh wait, yeah, I'm fasting. And it's a beautiful reminder of, oh yeah, look at that. Stomach growls. Signal says eat in the mind. I don't. And I'm still here. I haven't imploded or exploded. The sky hasn't fallen. I'm actually able to consciously, deliberately not respond to an impulse in my body or mind. And I don't cease to exist. I'm still here. And it's an incredibly important spiritual lesson, as we have so many impulses. So that's actually, from a spiritual and Ayurvedic perspective, why we fast. Now, whether you do it one day a week, whether you do it a certain number of hours per day, whether you do it for several days in a row, once a month, or at the turn of seasons, or whatever it may be, all of them are healthy and good for your body, assuming that you don't have something awry. Diabetics, I think, from what I've been told, shouldn't fast. By God's grace, I'm not diabetic. I don't have that many details on it. But I do know that there are certain ailments, issues, body types, etc., where it's not so good. But for almost all of us, it's really, really good for you. Choose whatever works. But if you can do it as a spiritual practice rather than just thinking that because it's good for your body, you may actually find that you've got a little bit more impulse to do it or motivation to do it. Or for some people, maybe being healthy for your body is the best motivation and the spiritual benefits are byproducts. So whichever way you are more motivated, do it like that. But if for whatever reason you want to have, or your body needs some fruit or some, water with lemon and honey, whatever it may be, it's fine. The body is not an enemy. We respond to it, we listen to it, and you can get the benefits of it, even if you're not absolutely refraining from food or anything entirely. So listen to your body. We all have a very good literal gut instinct if we just learn to listen to it. Great. Other questions? Yeah.
First and foremost, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your love, and your presence with us. I would love to know tonight one word or one quote that, in your opinion, illuminates the most important spiritual lesson.
One word or one quote. If I only get one word, quotes are hard. It's impossible to choose just one quote. There's so many brilliant, incredible, amazing masters and teachers. So rather than trying to choose from among the quotes, if I had to choose one word, I would say love. I think love is the most important. Love of ourselves, our capital S self, that actually pulls us out of the nonsense and the games and the struggle that our lowercase s gets wrapped up in. If I really love my true self, then I'm not going to give nearly as much time, attention, energy to the games of That person was rude. I'm so hurt. I wish I had that. That's not fair. Oh my God, I want to buy this. I mean, all of the stuff that pulls us off center. The anger, the jealousy, the greed, the resentment, all of that stuff. If I really, really love my true self, I'm going to recognize this is damaging me. And at the bare minimum, it's just wasting my time and preventing me from actually living in that. And then, from that, I love all. You know, I was born in a Jewish family, raised in a Jewish family. I now live in a beautiful Hindu world. So I've never been really steeped in any way in Christianity. But there's a teaching from Christ that I love, which is when he says, love thy neighbor as thyself. But it's been something that really baffled me for a long time, because I always thought, well, like, I don't even know my neighbors' names. Not here, but when I was living in America. I don't even know. I mean, yeah, I know the people across the street, but you can't even go halfway down my block before I no longer know anybody's names. What kind of a teaching is this? And what exactly does he mean by neighbor? Like, next door neighbor, down the block? I mean, does he give a radius somewhere? Is there any more of a specific description given? And I asked all of the Christian people I knew, and as I now have a great blessing of being in so many interfaith, intercultural environments and organizations and panels and programs and summits and whatnot, I asked another few leaders of the Christian tradition about this, and what everyone told me was no, there's no radius given, there's no limits to it. Nowhere did he say thy neighbor on thy block or thy zip code or nothing like that. And yet, when we talk about Scripture, we have to assume that there is a perfection in the teachings of Scripture. That when we're looking at the Word of God, however we take Scripture, that there's a perfection in it. And that doesn't mean it's not open to interpretation or commentary or translation or whatnot. But to me, it didn't make sense that he's going to say something like this that was very vague. And the only way for me, as the years went by, that I could understand this teaching was love God and realize that everyone is God. Because I don't think that there's another way you can actually do that. How can you really love someone if you don't actually know them? And since he didn't give any definition of the radius or of the outer limits of what counts as neighbor, well, surely it's not for us to say, well, I'll love everyone within 50 feet. What if he meant 2 kilometers? Right? We don't know. Which means that we must assume, essentially, he meant everyone. Which means, if we are given an injunction like that, we must at least aim to follow it. But if you don't even know your neighbors, how can you love them? The only way to me that it makes sense is love God and realize that everyone is the divine, is a reflection of, a manifestation of, an embodiment of that divine. And so that love that we have for ourselves then expands into all. And then, of course, into nature and the environment and all. I think the energy of love is the most powerful energy. And as far as a spiritual practice, in the Hindu tradition, we're given in the Bhagavad Gita a few different paths into God. The path of action, the path of wisdom, and the path of love or devotion called Bhakti Yoga. And it's the path of love. Attain God, attain everything just through love. Just love, and everything else will happen. So if you can attain God through love, and attain yourself and attain everything through love, seems like the best path. Yeah. We'll take this as our last question tonight.
Thank you so much for welcoming us tonight and for speaking these truths. In the spirit of loving God and loving all, how do you forgive betrayals that cause suffering in order to return to love?
How do you say that again? How do you?
What is the course to forgiving betrayals that have caused suffering to return to love?
Okay. So if we're going to love, if love is the path, how do we forgive? How do we forgive betrayals and hurt so that we can return to love? The first piece of it is we recognize that it isn't the action of someone else or the words of someone else that have made us no longer able to access love. It's our reaction to their words and their actions. Because so frequently the way that most of us respond is, you made me angry, right? I was so happy, I was having such a good day. Then you came home and you did this or you said that. And now my mood is ruined, my day is ruined. We blame other people for how we feel. So the first piece is to recognize that I have moved away from love based on my inability, and there's no judgment here at all, because there's certainly many things that people could do that make it really, really, really hard to love them. But we recognize they are just moving on their karmic path, their karmic journey. My choice whether to love or not is my choice. So that's the first piece, is we recognize it's all about me. Which means, of course, I have the power to let it go. I have the power to choose love. But choosing love doesn't mean I choose to say that that action was right or appropriate or felt good or I want it to happen again. Forgiving is what we do because we deserve freedom. Because freedom is our birthright. We don't forgive because what the other person did is okay. And that's really important to remember, because a lot of us don't forgive because we feel like, well, what someone did is so unforgivable that somehow we are violating a universal principle in some way by forgiving. Or that somehow if we forgive, they are going to be absolved of their karmic dues. And I know this was something that I struggled with a lot in my life. I had been through severe trauma, had been abused, had been abandoned. I mean, I had really, along with incredible blessings and incredible privilege and incredible everything, had also really suffered. And had held on to that as a sense of, this is my identity. Like, who I am is someone who was abused, abandoned, betrayed, violated, etc., etc. But also we don't forgive because it feels like forgiving is saying to the universe, oh, it's okay, don't worry about it. No problem. And that's okay if someone spills, accidentally a cup of hot tea on you, and it may really hurt, but you realize they didn't mean to do it, and eventually you calm down and you forgive them. But that's not necessarily how we feel when it's deeper betrayal. And especially not how we feel if someone purposely, knowingly hurt us. And that's where we realize that we've got the whole forgiveness thing as a big misunderstanding. We don't forgive because what they did was okay. We forgive because regardless of what they did, we deserve to be free. And by not forgiving, we cannot be free. And because they hurt us 1 time or 2 times or 10 times, but if I continue to hold the grudge now, I shift from being victim to being perpetrator. I am now carrying the pain into the present moment. And we literally take our freedom, our joy, our peace, and we offer it up on the altar of someone else's choices, actions, ego, anger, confusion, whatever it was that made them hurt us. And so we forgive when we say, enough, like you've already taken enough from me. I'm not prepared to give you my happiness and my peace and my freedom now. That's mine. You did whatever you did, fine, but I deserve joy, I deserve peace, I deserve freedom, and that's my priority. So we forgive in that way. We also forgive by recognizing that everyone is doing the very best they can with the toolkit that they've been given. And that nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to hurt this guy or this lady or really, ruin their life. Everyone's just moving through their own karmic journey the best way they can. And so we forgive. Again, so that we can be free. And ultimately we choose love. And depending on what it is that person did, in an ideal situation, you find love for them again. In an ideal situation, you are able to forgive and let go of whatever it is that happened in such a way that you can love them. And sometimes there are things that people do that are so violent, such violations, that the only way that we may be able to love them again is just to love their soul in a much more sort of spirit way rather than them as an embodied human being. Especially if they have absolutely no regret. I mean, it's another situation if someone says, I am so sorry that I hurt you. And you feel that and you know that. That's very different than someone who has no regret, has no repentance, doesn't think that what they did was wrong, which was the situation I had found myself in. So you're in, depending on how that person is, in an ideal world, they recognize they hurt you. They apologize for hurting you. You learn to open up your heart and trust again. You let it go, you forgive. And slowly, 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 the love blossoms again. And lastly, if it is one of those situations where that which they did is such that you just don't feel like you could actually love that person again, there's no rule that says that you have to love the actions of every individual. There are plenty of people who have lived throughout history who I have a very difficult time, despite decades of practice, generating love in my heart for them as far as their personality and actions in that body on this planet at the time that they lived go. But what I am able to generate is love for their spirit soul on its karmic journey, lifetime after lifetime, and the need for whatever reason for them in this lifetime to take on that role. And I'm able to find first, begins usually with some sympathy and pity, then it blossoms into compassion, then eventually it blossoms into love. For that soul that had to take on such a violent, harmful, troubled incarnation in order to work out its karmic stuff. But at the core, across all of these circumstances, we forgive because we deserve to be free. And so we make that our priority. And then we decide whether we are going to be able to actually love that person again, which again, hopefully we are. And if not, then at least we stay anchored in love for ourselves as we move through our world. Yeah. Beautiful. Before we close Satsang tonight, we have a very special birthday, as I mentioned in the Arti. It's our Dr. Manoj Patel's birthday today. I'll ask him to just stand so that we can all see him and give him a very, very, very happy birthday. Manoj ji has come in from Pittsburgh, where he and his wife Vasviben have been pillars of the Hindu Jain temple that Puja Swamiji founded 40 years ago. And now, having retired, he offers himself in this beautiful service. He did it even before he was retired, but now he has more time, in this beautiful service to the needy people who don't have access to good eye care and operations. So we have a bit of a satsang tradition when it's a birthday, which is we sing happy birthday first in English, which everybody can do, and then we sing it in however many languages we happen to have in the crowd on that day. So as we have people coming from all over the world, get ready. It's a lot of people's singing debut here in satsang. Don't worry, no judgment. You may find yourself the only person from a specific country, so it's up to you to sing